Look, the war has caused shockwaves in the global energy markets. We are all aware of that. And in Iran itself, the economic impact is being keenly felt. Let's bring in Nada Habibi, who is Professor of Middle East Economics at Brandeis University, to talk more about the wider ramifications of this conflict. It's good to have you. Let's start here. The US military says Iran has potentially lost $13 billion due to the US blockade of Iranian ports in the Strait. This info just posted by CENTCOM. This is part of that kind of wider economic squeeze to try and collapse or crash the Iranian economy. How much pressure is this adding? And I'm talking very specifically about the Strait of Hormuz blockade at this point. And what alternatives at this point do you see Washington has?
Hello, thank you for inviting me to your program. I think the pressure of the blockade is very intense. There is no doubt about it, because Iran conducts its international trade primarily through the Persian Gulf. As far as the intensity, it's obviously an important aspect of the United States economic warfare against the Islamic regime. But at the same time, if you're talking about bare minimum resiliency of the economy and bare minimum resiliency of the regime, the Iranian economy is diverse and large. Therefore, it can, at the bare minimum, still linger on, go forward under current circumstances, I would say for a month or two extra weeks.
A month or two extra is what you're saying. I'm hearing behind the scenes here, certainly around the region, there is this sort of, sense that there is a window of about 30 days in which the Trump administration is counting on economic pressure, really squeezing Iran. Have a listen to this.
Economic fury, continues to impose maximum pressure on the Iranian regime and what remains of their already frail economy. Today, inflation in Iran is 70%, and their currency is in total and complete freefall.
The president gave the order to Treasury, myself, to begin economic fury. I can tell you that we are suffocating the regime, and they are not able to pay their soldiers. This is a real economic blockade.
So you listen to the US administration officials there. I mean, it's pretty clear that what they call Operation Economic Fury is the real lever they think they have here in squeezing the economy. You say you think there's a month or two before that's really going to hurt. So what is going on behind the scenes in Iran?
Yes, well, the economy already is hurting, and even it was under intense pressure before this Operation Economic Fury began. So if we are talking about 70% inflation, the inflation before this war was already around 40 to 50%. It doesn't come as a shock, but nevertheless, it is going to further weaken the economy. We already know that because of the intense attacks of the 40-day war before the ceasefire, Iran's manufacturing activities have declined. One could say even 1 to 2 million workers have lost their jobs, and they are supporting families of maybe households of 4 or 5 people per worker. So the pressure on the economy is intense. However, we have to differentiate between the resilience of the economy and the resilience of the regime. The pressure on people is very intense, and it's likely to get worse. But then you have to say, how about the regime itself? How will that affect the resilience of the regime? There are still resources that the regime can use. There was a mention that they cannot pay the salaries. That is going to be a crisis. But some of their core supporters would still support them even at bare minimum salary and economic sustenance. We have to differentiate between these two.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, you're making an incredibly important point, because The rial hitting, that's the currency, of course, hitting record lows. Many Tehran residents expressing concerns over prices in the country, inflation, accessibility of supplies. So I guess the question at this point is, do you believe this US strategy, this economic squeeze, is a flawed strategy at this point?
I think from the US point of view, this is better than military action because the cost of military action is higher. When we look at the Iranian response of further attacks against GCC countries and against US military assets, which they have already done. So, and one could not rule out that this strategy would eventually pressure the Iranian regime into negotiating and accepting some very painful concessions. It's just that it's a matter of probability. And the reason for that is that, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I just want to get one more question in and we are running out of time. Obviously,
Sure.
sanctions
Yes.
on the table as part of this proposal, this memo or framework proposal in principle that Marco Rubio is hoping the US will get a response on from Iran today. Last question to you. Pakistan has opened land corridors to get goods in and out of Iran. And we know that there are, other borders where goods slip in and out of both the sort of, the sort of upfront economy and the grey economy, of course. But on the Pakistan corridor, how much of a lifeline is this for Iran at this point?
It is important because it allows Iran to at least receive the basic minimum supplies of food and medicine. And by the way, that corridor is operating with the implicit approval of the United States. So that corridor, if the United States wanted to close it, it can. Nevertheless, it has chosen to allow that to function. That corridor plus the access of Iran to trade, informal trade and undercover trade with Iraq, and also the fact that the Turkish border is still open for flow of people and trucks, means that some minimum bare essentials can still enter Iran. The question is how much reserves Iran has in order to pay for those imports. And the reason I say for a month or two in terms of resilience is that there is still some reserves that Iran has access to that have been saved inside the country to maintain those bare minimum trades that are essential.
It's been really good having you on. Really important insights as we continue to monitor what is going on. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Well,